Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hey there, it's Samantha. Now, if you're loving Now You Know, make sure you spread the word. Share this episode or your favorite one with your friends or anyone who needs a dose of women-powered wisdom. Every share helps grow our amazing community of listeners. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It makes a world of difference. Now, let's dive into this week's episode.
The Gulf region is amongst the most impacted when it comes to climate change just because of how it is at the moment in terms of the weather conditions and its location within the Tropic of Cancer. All the 6 GCC countries are amongst the most water scarce in the world, and it's only going to get worse.
No matter where you live, you've felt the effects of climate change. Glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising, and deserts are expanding, and that's not all. Thousands of animal and plant species are also affected by these changes. 2024 has put all of this into sharp focus. This year is set to be the hottest on record. By 2050, the United Nations has suggested that climate change may push 158 million more women and girls into poverty. But women can be the change our climate needs. That's what scientist Rumaitha Al Busaidi believes. And I want to know exactly how women can be that change. I'm Samantha Johnson, and this is Now You Know, a new series from Al Jazeera dedicated to amplifying women's voices, stories, and topics we're all thinking and talking about. This is a safe space where we go all in, so by the end of each episode, you can say, "Now I know." Rumaitha Al Busaidi is one accomplished woman. She was a professional footballer and is credited as the first female football analyst in the Arab world. She was also the youngest person from Oman to reach the South Pole. Now, that trip was the start of her journey to becoming a climate change and women's rights advocate. She's now the vice president of the Environmental Society of Oman, and I'm so pleased to say that she joins us right now. So Rumaitha, thank you very much for joining us on Now You Know.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
You have a very impressive resume. But what stuck out for me as a woman that loves football as well is that, you used to play ball. You used to be a professional footballer. So let's start with that. Like, tell me how you got into it. Tell me about the love of the game.
So I think I grew up in a family that is very, very, very heated when it comes to football. Both parents love football. So I think it just was in my DNA naturally to actually be a football player, I think. My dad was a referee for local clubs, and my grandfather also used to play for one of the local teams. So it's a natural given that you end up being in this. And I was the first daughter, grandchild, first everything.
Oh.
So I think that there's a lot of men, I think manly, what would you say? A lot of energy that came into this.
Mm-hmm.
I remember pictures of myself where I was given jerseys of different teams because everyone was fighting over which team I should have allegiances to. And I disappointed all of them because I decided my own team at the end, which is Chelsea.
You support Chelsea? Oh, wow. Yeah. Who's your favorite player? Who's your legendary Chelsea player?
I mean, Drogba is forever going to be my player. Forever, that generation.
You also played for the national team as well. So, that's really huge. What was that like as well, being called up for your country?
Huge, but at the same time, quite disappointing because it was just a few months of a stint until the team was no longer in existence anymore. But I would actually say that when I was called up, I had goosebumps for the very first time in a long time. Like, oh my God, I'm doing this thing for my country. And I think we all grow up being patriotic in some way and wondering how you could actually serve. And this was, for me, the calling to actually serve. And I still wear it as a badge of honor. I still have my jersey in my locker room and so on, just kind of looking at it whenever I go to the gym and so on, just to give me motivation that while I've kind of put that career aside, it's still a large part of me as well.
Now, I mentioned in our introduction that 2024 is set to be the hottest on record. And when it comes to the Gulf region, it's predicted to rise by 4 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. And it sounds very weird, me saying that year out loud, but it is what it is. Look, why is that?
The Gulf region is amongst the most impacted when it comes to climate change, just because of how it is at the moment in terms of the weather conditions and its location within the Tropic of Cancer and so on. It is already, like, all the 6 GCC countries are amongst the most water scarce in the world, and it's only going to get worse. By 2040, 2050, we're expecting that water scarcity. If you look at a heat map, usually they cover countries that have enough access to water as green, and countries that don't have enough access to water, which are water scarce, as red. The Gulf region is black. That's how bad it is.
Wow.
So it's quite severe when it comes to water scarcity, and also temperatures. We're a desert and arid climate, so it's only going to get worse as a result of that. So you don't have a lot of offsetting of those temperatures, and as a result of the changes in these increasing temperatures, you are actually, as weather patterns increase, you're actually, the differences between the high and low pressure are going to get increasing. And that kind of brings in more sandstorms, more cyclones, and more of those impacts as well.
So are there any policies in place to address this issue when it comes to the Gulf region?
They are. You're seeing a lot of them kind of changing or working on a lot of not only mitigation policies, like pretty much all. I can't recall if all 6 countries have it, but the majority have net zero plans at the moment to kind of ensure that they're focusing a lot on not only green jobs, but also green economic opportunities, on how do you diversify away from oil and gas. I think that is a phrase that you hear a lot from all the Gulf governments and also private sector players, but also looking at adaptation. So, for instance, using the experience of Oman at the moment with the other Gulf countries on mangrove restoration. Mangroves are proven to be able to protect the coast from a lot of the storms, because it kind of has really strong roots that really protect from erosion and from storms and from the coastal areas. But there's a lot being done. I wouldn't say it's enough. There's still a lot more to be done. And I think that's the case everywhere else.
Climate change is also another of your passions as well. So can you tell me about your journey?
I think the journey started seeing climate change for me. I think the first interaction was Cyclone Gonu back in 2007. So that was a Category 5 cyclone, the largest, most strongest, impactful cyclone that hit the coast of Oman. Before that, I don't think anyone has any recollection that we ever had these severe storms before. We always used to call them storms, but never like a major cyclone that really, really impacted not only the loss of life, but a lot of infrastructure.
Officials say at least 15 people have been killed by the storm, including a dozen in Oman, which took the brunt of Cyclone Gonu.
And you still have people, including my own peers, that are still having some sort of anxiety as a result of that impact, right? Mm-hmm. I was out of the country, so I was actually pursuing my studies in the Netherlands when that happened. And it was before the time of having instant communication and social media, so you are updated all the time. My parents decided not to tell me that this was going to happen and kept me in the dark until the day before, when a friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm just checking on you." And it was on MSN Messenger. We were just chatting. It was like, "I'm just checking on you. Are your parents okay? Because there's evacuation orders, because we live by the sea of your town. So is everything okay?" And I was like, "Evacuation for what?" And she was like, "It's a cyclone that's happening." And I only found out a week later that everyone was okay. And then seeing the whole country kind of come together, helping each other out, was kind of the aha moment of, I need to do something that has a purpose that's bigger than me. Maybe football wasn't the way, but maybe this could be, you know? So that's how I kind of pursued it as a result.
You just said that people are still kind of suffering from the effects of something that happened in 2007. What does that look like?
Some of my friends are now more into hoarding of what would happen if tomorrow there's no electricity or water or whatever. And then you have others that have been impacted more in a much more closer way. They lost their homes and lived in caravans for a long time until they moved into new housing. We started having this current trend where now science says, according to the data we have in Oman, that Oman is expected to have one severe cyclone once every 5 years.
Wow.
And literally like clockwork, you're seeing it happen. The last one was back in 2021, and people are just really reeling and trying to kind of come to terms of the next one is coming, so I need to be prepared for that. But also, how do I reconcile with losses that happened as a result of these recurring cyclones as well?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been swept away by a cyclone as well?
That was Fat, yes. That was a cyclone in 2010.
I mean, I can't imagine ever being in a situation like that.
I didn't even make it to the car and I was just swept away. It was quite instant. It's just like this and you're down and you have to kind of seek shelter. And it was the 10th probably house down the line that said, come in, we'll just protect you until things are done.
Oh my gosh.
So I ended up actually sheltering with them for days because it was just really bad. This is probably the first time that I've shared that. We all go through a lot of impacts of climate change, but don't realize it. And that's why I think for a lot of people around the world, there's a lot of polarization of whether climate change is a real issue or if it's a hoax.
Well, Rumaitha, just thank you for sharing that experience with us. I'm really honored and touched that you told us that. You are someone who I see as a natural athlete, but even going to the South Pole is just a different level. You have to tell us about that journey. Like, okay, what made you want to do it for starters? And how did you prepare for that?
I grew up in a household where you were allowed to explore and whatever you wanted to do, you can do it. It wasn't like it's set in stone, it's black and white, life should be this way. Although sometimes, coming from a conservative background as well, sometimes you do get those lines, but you're allowed to as well color outside of those lines. And I remember the main motivation for me was a conversation that I had with my grandfather, who is extremely traditional. And I told him, well, I have this vision for myself going to the Antarctic and doing something. I always wanted to do research. I'm a marine scientist by background, and I wanted to do a lot of research in the Antarctic because it's the dream, right? And there's a lot of species there that are just amazing and fascinating to kind of learn from. And he ended up laughing in my face, saying, that's impossible. You're a girl. You can't do this. What? No, I will do this. And it was kind of like an argument going back and forth that ended up with a bet. So the bet was, if I don't reach the Antarctic, then I will be a girl's girl and stop being tomboyish and be a decent girl.
What did he mean by that? Because
I love football. A lot of the things that were conventionally girly were things that I kind of threw out. And I was like, no, this is not for me. So he was trying to kind of convince me that you need to be more ladylike. I am loud. I scream. I do whatever I want, which was quite not okay kind of within the societal construct of how women should act. If I were to be successful and reach the South Pole, then he had to go to all the tribes leaders that he meets on a weekly basis and confirm that women are better than men.
Oh.
Challenge accepted. Challenge accepted.
And obviously you won. Because you were the youngest as well. You're the youngest.
Yes.
How old were you?
I was turning 24. The first person that I called when I made it was my grandfather. I told him I made it. And his response was, okay, you win, but come back safely. Like he was, to his dying day, may his soul rest in peace. He had, and I remember when we were kind of sorting his room, he had a lot of the clippings of the newspapers after, like with all the news of, I made it, the youngest Omani on the South Pole, and my pictures everywhere. So he was extremely proud. I know that for a fact. And he did actually take on the challenge, and in front of me actually got his friends around and said, I just need to say this because it was a bet and I lost the bet. Women are better than men. And they all apparently agreed. They were like, yeah, the boss of my household is a woman, so why wouldn't women be the best?
Wow.
So this was kind of an amazing full circle moment as well for me.
You did face some insensitive comments, I think it was before before that challenge. I mean, what were people saying to you before you went to the South Pole?
I think I've developed much more of a thicker skin as a result of playing football, actually, because that was not something that was common either, having women playing football. I think the comments that I got trying to go to the South Pole, the main comment that I got is I was going for vacation and not really for anything else. The main purpose behind the whole expedition was to raise awareness on the importance of preserving Antarctica, but also raising funds. For me personally, was raising funds for the Environment Society of Oman, which is the only NGO that is concerned with the environment in Oman. The other comment that I got a lot is, you're a woman, so why are you going? Why are you going alone? And are you fit enough? And another main comment was basically because I don't look like the usual physique that people would assume to be of a fit woman per se. So it's like, yeah, you're a bit chunky, so why are you going? You're not fit enough to go. So are you ready physically to do this? I've come to the conclusion, at least for myself and for my maybe well-being, that for a lot of these comments, it comes from a place of concern rather than ridiculing someone's ambitions, but they just don't know how to say it.
So did you see any signs of climate change?
Definitely. Icebergs were splitting at a time where they shouldn't. One of the largest ones was we actually saw one that kind of broke off completely from the continent.
Wow.
And was just literally, it's a large sheet of ice. And that was quite shocking. Another instance was as we were camping, resting for one of the days at night, really enjoying the view of the Milky Way, we were actually disturbed by a sound of literally hearing an iceberg crack. And you could hear the echo reverberate, and you were like, what's going on? And they were like, well, we don't know. It's an iceberg cracking, and we don't know if this is an avalanche that will hit us or not. Just be prepared and be as far away as possible from the areas of impact. Luckily, I'm here, so I survived.
Now, Rumaitha, you believe that women can be the change, a positive change when it comes to climate change. Can you just tell us, what does gender equality have to do with climate change?
So one of the key studies that has been done in terms of exploring climate change and solutions to climate change is a project called Project Drawdown, where it maps out, throughout the years, it has mapped out solutions that the world can come together in order for it to really combat climate change. The number one solution that always kind of is touted, including this project, is educating and empowering women and girls. And the main reason behind that is the fact that women have a multiplier effect. If we all go back to the things that we learned as a child, like turning off your tap when you brush your teeth, switching off electricity switches whenever you are leaving the home and so on, all these practices and behaviors are things that we learned from our mother and our grandmothers. So by default, you have that within you to actually pass on that knowledge. It's very natural for women to do that. They nurture communities anyway. Mm-hmm. So that would be the best way to actually make sure that practices, behaviors, policies, and everything in regards to that is more on an equal footing for the full community and the whole world as a result of that. That's what I believe in. That's what data and research has shown. And it's quite evident that that's the way to actually, one of the ways to actually do it and combat climate change. What we're seeing a lot as well is the lack of gender responsive policies when it comes to addressing climate change.
Why is that?
So I think the assumption is we all have and face climate change impacts the same way, when that is not true. So as a simple example, I referred to a cyclone that Oman was hit back in 2021. For the women who were actually impacted by that, they were the first women that, they were first ones that were expected to quit their jobs and take care of their families because, yeah, we are at a crisis. That's the first thing that you do. You need to quit your job and take care of everyone else. That was expected and not even an option given. It was just expected that you would do that or take leave, while men were allowed to actually get the option of both, either do this or that. Another example as well is because of the situation of crisis as well, you end up as a woman, specifically in our part of the world, specifically in the Middle East, North Africa, and the South Indian subcontinent specifically. We treasure women and our gold because that's one of the things that you have, that is yours, that you own. And that's maybe a rightful passage to adulthood, that you own something that's yours, right? That's the easiest thing that you can own. And that's the first thing that goes out the window when a crisis happens, because you're told, can you sell your gold so we can survive? And that's the first thing that women do. They sell their gold because it's much more liquid, when men have assets that are much more difficult and less liquid, like land.
I want to go back to the impact women and girls have or can have in terms of just making a good impact for climate change. How can women and girls be that change? And if they can, and if so, is it fair to put that responsibility onto women and girls?
There's so many ways that we can actually make an impact. And I think it starts with the home itself and the impact that you have with your own relatives and your own family and the immediate circle that you have. Spreading as much awareness as possible. This is something that we love to do, by the way, as women. For the majority of us, we all have our school teachers that we remember and have fond memories of are a lot of the women rather than the men, at least for me. And I had both men and women, but the ones that I still remember to this day and still am in touch with are the women that really nurtured a lot of the skills, including my public speaking skills, thanks to them. So I think that has a big impact there. But also we have a big role to play in the spaces that we occupy at work, in the organizations that we lead, in the startups that we found. There's a scientific research and also the expectation that sustainability and taking care of the environment is very feminine. So that's a space that you can kind of come in and take charge of. We're seeing some countries as well that are taking on gender responsive policies into consideration. For a lot of countries, not an opportunity that is capitalized enough on how you could be more gender responsive in a lot of the things that you do, specifically when it comes to climate change. So there are various elements that we can do. But with that said, answering your question, absolutely not. It's not fair that it's all on us. It needs to be an equal thing that we're all coming together as the whole community. And it's an intergenerational thing. You're seeing more young people more aware. I've been part of a study that did study the climate anxiety levels of Arab youth, and it has tripled in a span of a few years. They're more climate anxious than their actual parents and grandparents.
Wow.
And that's also another conversation of how do you bring in the older generations to really believe that this is something that needs to be worked on together rather than, this is a young people's issue and I can just go ahead and do business as usual. That's not okay as well, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not fair, but in the same time, there are spaces that we can actually do something. And if we don't do something and if we don't advocate for ourselves and our gender, no one will.
You created I think you can call it a company and a community called WOMEX. Tell us more about that and what you do.
We're teaching two types of negotiations with an aim to empower as many Arab women as possible. So we do job salary negotiations or a raise negotiations if you are looking up for a promotion. And the other aspect is having uncomfortable conversations. So we have an example of a girl who actually was impacted by the cyclone back in 2021, right before the cyclone, who was so eager to learn how to swim, but didn't know how to have that conversation with her father. So she ended up having that conversation, and she always was told with a no, that's not going to happen. Like, over my dead body, this is not happening. But she then learned the skills of how do you sit with it and just go ahead and continue having that conversation, even though you are uncomfortable. And she ended up convincing her dad, coming to a compromise. Fine, I won't be taught by any other guy if that's the fear. You will teach me how to swim because you know how to swim. And as a result of her learning how to swim, when the cyclone happened, she was able to encourage everyone else to learn that skill now. So everyone now in her entire community knows how to swim.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, only 8 out of the 78 world leaders participating in this year's COP29 were women. Now, tell me this, if women and girls bear the brunt of climate change, or the climate crisis even, why aren't there more women at the table making the tough decisions?
I think it's twofold. The perception that women are less than, one, and also the access to a lot of these opportunities and leadership positions are quite scarce. Research has shown as well, for us to demand a seat at the table, we feel more comfortable if the job description covers what I already know. So that's also a self-confidence gap that we have globally. So I think one aspect is advocating us, as many women as possible who are in leadership positions, to advocate for other women to be on the decision-making table is of importance, but also supporting each other to be sure that we're confident enough to take that position and not really get someone questioning that you are capable of doing something. We need to kind of push each other more. And I don't see that enough, honestly. I don't see more women kind of coming and supporting other women and saying, we need to get you in the room. It's more, I'm happy to be in the room as the only one, rather than advocating for others. And that needs to change as well. Like, how do we get some women out of that patriarchy mindset and really making sure that we're all in it to win it together, rather than just focusing on being a token.
Rumaitha, Oman's superwoman, thank you very much for joining us on Now You Know. I really do appreciate your journey, your storytelling, and for you giving us your time.
No, it was an absolute pleasure. I really had amazing fun with the conversation. And thanks for making me go vulnerable in a bit of those topics as well. I appreciate it.
So now you know how women can be a force for good to combat climate change. A huge thank you to Rumaitha Al Busaidi for sharing her story. And of course, a special thanks to you for listening to and watching Now You Know.